Hi everybody, this is a first grader's review video of the conventions of drama. So here, conventions associated with the action or plot of the play. So we'll talk about the traditional rules of drama related to action or the plot. Okay. So the Freytag's triangle or pyramid is one of the commonly used way to map the action of play. So here we have Freytag's triangle, which is a tool, which is a structure that can, which is a structure to map. Here it means like explain, right? So explain the action of the play or the structure of play. Freytag's triangle or Freytag's pyramid is commonly used way to explain the structure of plays. So this approach was devised by the German playwright Gustav Freytag in 19th century. So German person invented this concept of Freytag's triangle, and it offers a way of understanding the structure of many plays. So it provides us with a way to understand the structure or the plot of the plays. Okay, but it should be used as a general frame, not a representation of exact structure of a place. So when you use Freytag's triangle, it can only use as a general frame, general tool to understanding the overall structure, average structure of the play. So Freytag's triangle cannot really represent every single play that exists in the world. No, we only need to use this Freytag triangle as a general frame, general tool to understand the structure of the play. And perhaps it best serves as a useful measure of congruence and deviation. So congruence here means like congruence means you combine together. You combine everything. So when you understand a 12th night, you can use the Freytag's triangle and plus other devices, other literary technique to understand the 12th night. Okay, you cannot use only the Freytag's triangle to understand the 12th night. No, you have to combine this Freytag's triangle with other literary technique in order to understand entire 12th night. Or you can use it as a part of a deviation. Deviation means like variation. So when some other place uses some different structure, you can also use this Freytag's triangle in order to recognize, in order to understand that a certain play is not really following the traditional method, traditional rules. So it is best that we can use Freytag's triangle as a combination, congruence, or deviation of other literary techniques. At the top of page 170 is a version by Barbara McManus. So on the next page, we will be able to see the triangle. And it is helpful to use the terminology of this triangle to refer to a certain part of the play. So if we use this Freytag's triangle, we can easily, effectively confer different part of drama. So here, this is a Freytag's triangle, right? We have beginning part and we have middle part and end part. So here, the exposition of the play usually occur in the first scene or pages of the script and answers at least some of the following questions: who, what, when, where, and why. So we have a exposition stage, which is the beginning exposition phase, and it occurs in the first scene. And this exposition scene try to answer not whole lot of questions. You know, if you answer all the questions in the at the exposition, you won't have any more stories left to tell throughout the drama. So it in the exposition position it only some part of the question answers some part of the question, such as who, what, when, where, and why. Okay, and we have a rising action size, right? And we have a rising action follows the exposition phase. And rising action introduces most of the essential material and shows how the characters are involved in the action, conflict, or the issue on which the play focuses. So in the rising action here, the rising action, it introduces most essential material, most important issues. Most important issues and most important stories and questions are introduced during the rising action phase, and it also shows how characters are involved in the action, conflict, and the issue. So it explains how our main characters are involved in certain conflict and actions or problem in the plays. And it usually arises from some impulse introduced early in the play. So the rising action usually based on some beginning, some impulse introduced early part. So in the beginning, you explain some of the part of the story, and rising action is built up based on this story explained in the beginning session, and so it rises from those beginning session, and is sometimes called exciting force, which set off the complication. So here, the rising action also called as an exciting force. Okay, so this exciting force is making the situation story more complicated. Okay, so the exciting force is what makes story more interesting, more complicated, and more complex. And most students are familiar with the high point of action in novels and films called the climax. So after the rising action, you have a rising action, and after the rising action, we have a climax. Follows the rising action, and this is a high point. Climax, as you guys already know, is a highlight, right? Most interesting part, the story, high point, and this feature will likely to be found somewhere along the line of action, sometimes in the middle, but sometimes unexpectedly early or late. So climax usually follows rising action, and the climax's positions is sometimes like changes. It differs. So somewhere in the middle, it happens in the middle, or sometimes it happens a little bit early, or sometimes it happens a little late. It depends on what kind of story the writer wants to tell. Oftentimes, it is the point of greatest interest and sometimes of emotional response on the part of audience. So usually, a climax is usually the greatest interest, most interesting part, and it causes the biggest emotional response from the audience. Okay? And certain things in the action of the play are often seriously altered by the climax of the play and give rise to a falling action. So, you know, uh, um, alter. So after you have a climax, and climax alters. It sometimes change the story. After the climax, the story changes and it approaches to a falling action. Everything starts to settle down. All the questions and conflict start to settle, and the story start to falling down. Preparing for conclusion, preparing for wrapping up the story. So which in turn lead on to what is invariably called the denouement or the resolution. So this falling action side, here the we have climax, and climax followed by the falling action, and falling action is followed by denouement, right? So denouement, or it's called as a resolution. Okay? So unknotting of the thread of the plot. So one student asked me a question of the meaning of the unknotting of the thread of the plot. Okay, so here this is a knot. Okay, so I mean I'm sorry, not knot. This is a thread, right? Thread, and sometimes the thread become knotted, very complicated, right? No, so this thread can become knotted, right? This is a knotted situation. So you have a exposition, and at the this is a metaphor, right? This is explain metaphor. Metaphor. At the exposition side, everything is simple, everything is straight, and characters and conflict they are not become complicated yet. They are not become knotted yet in the story. And during the rising action, the thread and the conflict and characters start become more complicated issues, and they are involved with each other. So it become knotted and complicated. And in the falling action, it started become a unknotting again. So everything is solved, and questions and conflict become solved, and it became start to be unknotted. Everything start to settle down and straight again. Okay. So that's what denouement and resolution is. Everything becomes solved and problem solved. And there are, in fact, so many ways in which play can conclude that it is important to remain flexible when applying label. Label means the names, right? So we learned several different names, such as like exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement or resolution. Each different label, each different names. When we apply these names, which stage is a rising action, which stage is a climax, which stage is a falling action, we have to be flexible. We need to remain flexible because the drama it doesn't really follow all this structure. We have several different all kind of different styles, all kind of different structure inside the drama. So applying these labels, applying these names to each part of the state, each part or each stage of drama, we have to be a little flexible. Okay, this is not a mathematics, right? This is a literature, this is a drama, so we should be more flexible applying for name of each stage. So the action of the play may fall into such a division as act, open a larger unit, and scenes, either subdivisions or act or unit of their own. So the actions of play, it separate into, it fall into, or it separate into small divisions, small part, such as act, okay? Such as act or scenes. So play consists of different act or different scenes. And act, and we have act and different scene inside the play, and act is a bigger unit, okay? Most larger unit. Act is larger than the scene, and scene is rather subdivision. It means that scene belong to act, okay? So we have different act in the 12th night. You guys remember, right? We have Act 1 and we have Act 2, right? And 12th night actually has until like Act 5, okay? And each act, they have subdivision. They have smaller part of scene. So Act 1 consists of different scenes. Okay. So Act 1 consists of scene 5. Okay. So scene is a subdivision, smaller than the act or unit of their own. Sometimes the scene, scene itself is another unit, right? And smaller than the act. So that's what it means. Act is consists of different. I mean, the play consists of different acts and different scenes. An act is larger unit than the scene. I hope it makes sense. Okay. So act and scenes, whether explicitly identified or not, are carefully decided by the playwright to deliver the action with an appropriate conceptual and emotional rhythm. So when the writer, they are dividing this act and scenes, they are not just doing it randomly. Okay, it's they carefully decide how to act and how to divide act and scenes in order to create appropriate concept and appropriate emotional rhythm. Writers, playwrights, they really carefully decide which act and which scene, how they will divide those scenes. Even intermissions designed by the playwright can affect the way the audience react to the play. So intermission is a break time, right? When you guys go to watch drama or when you go to watch musical in the theater, you have a break time in between, right? So that's called intermission. Even this intermission time is designed by the playwright, and it can make some kind of reaction. It can affect how audience react to your play, where to put the intermission. So they carefully design this time. And the prologue or an epilogue occur respectively before the play begins or after it ends. So the prologue is story before the main play begins. Is the prologue, right? And on the other hand, epilogue is a play after story. The main story is ending. I guess you guys already familiar with the concept of prologue and epilogue. With so many like different medias and YouTube, you can see prologue and epilogue of a drama or movie, right? So it's also a part. A prologue and epilogue is a various way to deliver information or our reflections. Okay, so this is the end of the exam unit, right? So I hope that this review video helped you guys to prepare for your exam. Okay, so it wraps up today's this session of video, and I hope you guys have a good luck with your exam. And see you next time. Thank you for watching. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.